Hello. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. As it said, I'm going to speak about compassion today. And I work for a charity where I get the privilege of walking alongside people from all different stratas of society, but who are finding themselves in the point where they have been homeless. And we work towards offering supported accommodation so that we give them the skills, the confidence, the healing, the ability to live independently. And sometimes, as I'm getting to know a tenant, finding out something about their story, whether they're a refugee who has arrived in this country with nothing, or somebody who a few years previously maybe has running their own company, but as mental health or relationships or their own physical health has deteriorated and find themselves in a completely different alien situation, one of the things that I often hear is how they fell through the cracks. And very often, the thing which has stopped them hitting rock bottom or helped them back up was someone's compassion, when somebody was able to notice what was happening in their lives. It's brilliant that we've got big institutions when it comes to our health, our social welfare, our education. But between those big institutions, we need individuals like us, the community, who are willing to stop and demonstrate and show compassion to people to help them mind the gap. So what is compassion? Just so we're all on the same page here. Well, it's very basic. Compassion is an emotional response when you're perceiving someone in suffering, and then a desire to do something about it. And I guess we all know that feeling of wanting to do something, but also, will I be able to make any difference here? And the danger is that we become people who just walk on past everything. Now, within my very short amount of time, one of the things I would want you to hold on to is we're not suggesting that you give whatever is asked of you every single time. Compassion is about wanting what is best for the person, which isn't always about giving what they want, but is about seeking what they need. So, literally, compassion means to suffer with, okay? If you translated it from the two Latin words which make up our word compassion, it means to suffer with, okay? The idea of this, I'm going to join you in your suffering. And in order to help you, it's going to cost me something. That might be time, it could be money, it could be my expertise, whatever it is. But in joining with you and in sharing with you, it relieves some of the burden from you. I will take it from you. That is what true compassion is. And I just want to share 3 stories with you today, hopefully to get us thinking and feeling a little inspired again about compassion. We often hear about compassion fatigue. I'd like to maybe top that up within us today. Now, the organization I work for, Hope into Action, it actually started on a park bench. A guy called Ed Walker, who was, he'd taken his children down to the park, was watching them play, and he noticed that there was another guy on a bench. Now, Ed had just come back from working overseas, where he'd been working in humanitarian work. While he was back in the UK, just to sort of get him going again, he was working in hostels and with youth work and the like. And he spotted this guy, and he said there was something about him. He looked quite disheveled, but he was quite clean, but he was drinking something from a paper bag. It was quite early in the morning, and he wondered what was going on. So he got engaged with him in conversation. And he discovered that this guy had just left prison that morning, and he had nowhere to go. And so Ed, in a moment of compassion, in a moment of seeing this man suffering, decided, I want to do something about this. And so he got on the phone and he rang some of the contacts, some of the hostels that he worked alongside. And he was shocked to discover that no one would take this guy on. There was always a reason not to give this guy a chance. He's too old for our hostel. We don't take ex-offenders. Whatever the reason was, there was a brick wall that was hit. And so as Ed said, as he sat there in that moment conversing with this man and feeling completely helpless, he looked around where he was, which was quite high up in the city he was in. And he said he could see about 12 churches. And he thought, within those churches, I know that there are people who would want to help. And that was the seed for this charity. And that was that he went and invested some of his own money to purchase a house. And then he purchased that house to offer a supported accommodation, which would offer professional support within it, but provide a community around it to help the people who were living in there. And those communities came from volunteers who were in the local church. You see, Ed realized that what this man needed in his life wasn't just about a poverty of resources, that he had a lack of money, he had no roof over his head or a place called home. But he also had a poverty of relationships. He had no one to go to. He'd left the town deliberately where he was because he didn't want to end up back in the circles that he was in before. He had no one to go to. So Ed not only wanted to provide a home, the resource, but also a community so he could have relationships. But there was also the poverty of identity. See, the guy said that as he left the prison guard says to him, "See you in 3 months' time." This idea of you'll be back again, you're just going round in a circle, crushing any value and any sense of potential within him. And so there was this, at the core of what Ed wanted to provide in this moment of compassion were these three things. And that's what our charity is based on. And so from that moment, for Ed investing the money into one house after speaking to one man on his bench, we now have over 120 houses around the country about 10, 12 years afterwards. I say about 120. The number changes every time I ask, okay? 13 are in Nottingham, and we're due to open 2 more this year, each one offering support, each one offering relationship, each one offering a chance for a new start and discovering a new identity to move forwards with their future that we believe in them for. And so we might say that Ed was something of a Good Samaritan in this moment. It's a phrase which we've all become familiar with, I'm sure. It's entered into the consciousness of the way we speak. A Good Samaritan. A Samaritan. Where did that story come from? This is my second story. Is everyone familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan? Shall we go through it anyway? Here we go, the Good Samaritan. I'm going to tell it in 7 parts. You see, when we go to school here, and you do anything about writing a story, we're told about the importance of a good beginning, middle, and ending. However, this story was first told about 2,000 years ago, and it comes from the Middle East. And one of the ways of reading this story is chiastically. There's a pattern to it, okay? And what that often means is the central part of the story, the middle part of the story is the hinge. Something really important is going to happen in the middle, and it's going to flip the story, okay? So, in the story of the Good Samaritan, what we hear is that there is a man traveling on the Jericho road who is robbed and injured and left for dead. And then what happens is a priest walks by. But he walks on by. He does nothing about the man who is injured. What happens about that? What happens next? It says that a Levite walks past, okay? Now, the thing to bear in mind here is that we are told at the beginning that the man who was injured and robbed was a Jewish man. And the priest was somebody that the crowd who were listening to this story would expect him to help the man. They would expect him to do what was needed to get this man back to health. But when he didn't, and the Levite is the next to walk by, they think, well, at least the Levite will do something to alleviate this man's suffering. But still, that is not the case. Now we get to the central part of the story. It says that a Samaritan comes and acts with compassion. Now, this would have it causes no reaction here whatsoever. This would have caused uproar on the day. Why? Because essentially these are enemies. This is like saying there was a Forest fan lying on the floor, and then a Derby fan acted with compassion. A few more from Nottingham and London. Okay, so maybe. It would have caused great surprise. And then this is the hinge moment. This is where the story flips. You see, because the Samaritan has compassion, he wants to do something to alleviate the suffering. It says that he treats the wounds of the man. He does what the Levite could have done as a least. It says that he transports him to a place of safety. And then finally, he undoes where he was robbed and injured. It says there is generosity and healing, because he says to the innkeeper, look after this man, and whatever it takes, sort him out. I will pay the bill when I come back. So you see how this man is on a path to death, essentially, but because of a moment of compassion from the person you least expect, the story is flipped, and we walk away from the path of death towards a path of life. Compassion is the central part of this story. Now, why was this story being told? The story is being told because Jesus was asked a question, the Bible says, about who is my neighbor? That's why he tells this story. He didn't just come out randomly with it. He's trying to answer this question. Who is my neighbor? He's being tested here. How do we figure out who we treat well? How do we figure out who we treat with compassion? Is it the people who live in the same building with me or either side of me? Is it those people in the same road? Is it the people in the same tribe as me or the same football team as me? Is it the people who I will benefit from? Who do I treat as my neighbor? This was a central philosophical question that was being asked. The answer is being flipped here. Not to look around and decide who is my neighbor, but to look and decide who am I going to be a neighbor to. That is what this story is trying to tell us. Who will I be a neighbor to? Who will I show compassion to? Now, I tell this story, and I can't tell this story without telling a story that happened very recently. And this is my third and final story. I was part of a team that was sharing, working through part of an RE curriculum in a comprehensive school in Nottingham. And we were taking the whole school through this curriculum, teaching about various parables, including this one, which used to happen between about 10:30 and 11:30. And I'd done this lesson about 20 times. And it had been organized by some community leaders. And on the 11th of November, Remembrance Day, one of the community leaders, who was an old man, said to me, is it all right if I speak in the 11 o'clock session? And I said, of course it is. Quite glad of the change after doing it 25 times or whatever it was at that point. And this old man stood up during the 11 o'clock session, around about the time when there was the silence that would be remembered. And he takes out of a plastic bag some items. There's an old water bottle. There's some goggles. There's some gloves. And there's a holster. These are all military, these are all items that have been given out by the military. And the final thing he gives out is a diary. And he explains that all of these things belonged to his great-grandfather, who had fought in World War I. And he picks up the diary and he starts to read through, it's only a tiny diary, read through the couple of words that were put onto some of the days. And then he gets to the final entry, which was on October the 18th, I believe, 1916. And it had 3 letters. And it said OTT. And the man asked the class, do you know what OTT is? Nobody knew. And so he explains, this means over the top. This was when his brigade, the soldiers he was with, went over the top of their trenches to charge at the enemy in order to try and take some ground. Now they've been told, when you do this, if you are shot or injured, stay where you are. When the battle is finished, we will send a team of medics to you. The grandfather, the great-grandfather, sure enough, charges, goes over the top, charges, he's shot in the leg, he goes down. He waits for the firing to finish, for the battle to end. He's lying in the quagmire that we've all seen from World War I. He said that all around him is the sound of men dying, groaning, crying out, many calling for their mothers. But nobody comes to help them. As the sun begins to set, he begins to think his time has come. But then he notices one man making his way between the injured people on the battlefield. And eventually, this man arrives at the grandfather, and he does what he's been doing to everybody else. He bends down, and he had a paper bag, and in his paper bag, he had a sugar cube. And he gives it to the great-grandfather for some energy and sustenance. Then he looks around, and he does what he can. He finds something to make a splint. He puts it on the great-grandfather's leg, picks him up, points him to a nearby road, and just points that way and sends him on his way. The grandfather made it to the road, was picked up by a truck, ended back in the UK, and survives to tell the tale. But what he told us was this, that during that exchange, not one word was spoken. The reason for that was the man that came to help was a German soldier. And so here's a man 3 generations on, sort of saying, my great-grandfather was rescued by a German soldier. That was his Good Samaritan. And he's standing here today to acknowledge that man and saying, I've got 2 generations after me, 5 generations of people saved by this one man. Why? Because when you mix sugar cubes and bits of broken wood with compassion, it saves lives. Now, today, I want to inspire you a little bit. And it might not be that your moment of compassion will save lives. It might not be that it will start charities. But I'm certain it will make someone's day. And in doing so, make a better community and a better society.